Ed discovers snow. It was January, very quiet and very cold at the zoo. Even though Ed had not been outside his enclosure for a few days now, Zora had kept him wearing his striped socks. She did not want Ed getting cold feet, she said. Ed had been spending his spare time catching up on the news with his neighbour Zack. The elephant had been telling Ed that elephants did not like cold weather either, but that when it was really cold, he simply stayed inside his nice warm area. He told Ed that in the wild, if elephants did get cold, then they would simply huddle together to share whatever warmth that they had. Ed thought this was a very good idea. Ed explained to Zack that giraffes were not so lucky, and that they were made for warmer climates, and that now he was beginning to think that it was time for him to retreat indoors and stay there until the spring. He would only venture out if somebody needed his help. Zack told him this sounded very sensible, and that actually some animals slept through the whole winter period. This was called hibernating. The special one knew that giraffes did not hibernate, and he began to wonder which animals did. Olivia had told Ed last winter that giraffes' long necks were one reason as to why they were good at staying warm. Their necks were in fact designed to provide larger cooling areas when giraffes could turn their heads towards the sun. No chance of that in English climates, thought Ed. As Ed stood pondering this thought, he suddenly realised that it was getting even colder, and that big white flakes had begun to settle on his long eyelashes. Strange, thought Ed. What is happening? As he looked up into the sky, he saw that it was full of these big white flakes, and that they were falling everywhere that he could see, and that was a very long way indeed. They were beginning to turn all of the red roofs white, and the ground also. The paths were disappearing before his eyes. Ed decided to hurry inside, and as he trotted back across his enclosure, he noticed that he was making clear footprints and leaving outlines of his socked feet behind him. Wow! This is really cool, thought Ed. Literally. As he got nearer to the door to his inside area, he could hear whooping and squeaking coming from the enclosure on the other side to Zack. This was where the penguins lived. Somebody seemed to be having fun. He looked over the wall. A large group of penguins were behaving as if they were on holiday, jumping into the pool and sliding down the slide into the cold water time and time again, and just splashing around, playing tag and enjoying themselves. Ed noticed that several were making snowballs in their beaks and flicking them at each other. He then saw that their black feathers were now almost covered in the white flakes, and the penguins, being white all over, were suddenly very difficult to see. Penguins clearly liked the cold weather and this white stuff. Then Ed noticed another group who did not look quite so happy at all. They were doing their best to avoid the white flakes and were huddling together under a rock overhang above the pool. Ed thought this was very strange. Surely all penguins loved cold weather. Ed then heard a noise behind him, and as he turned his extraordinary long neck, he saw it was Olivia and Zora coming into the enclosure. "Are you watching the penguins play?" asked Olivia. She recognised the puzzled look on Ed's face and explained to Ed that the ones fooling around were emperor and rockhopper penguins, and that they were used to the cold weather because they came from a place called the Antarctica. She explained that the white flakes were snow, which is made out of water vapour, which was like a mist, forming high up into the warmest clouds, and, as the vapour falls through colder clouds, clumps together to form snow, which in turn is made up of snowflakes. Olivia told Ed that each snowflake is a little miracle, holding up to 100 snow crystals, which form together, creating beautiful shapes that can be seen under a microscope. Just before they melt, thought Ed. Ed smiled. He liked learning new things. Olivia went on to tell Ed that the penguins shielding from the cold weather were called jackass penguins. Ed thought this was not very nice, until Zora told him that it was only the noises that they made, which were like a donkey, which gave them their name. Ed smiled a big smile. He wondered if he was named for a reason. Perhaps he would find out one day. Olivia told Ed that it was not true that all penguins came from cold places like many people thought, and that many came from warmer climates, and when they did, they had to burrow in the earth to keep cool, as they did not like it too hot either. So, once again, Ed realised that everybody was different. He liked understanding those differences. It somehow made him feel better and safer. The special one decided it was time to follow the example of his new friends, the jackass penguins. Although he was not made for burrowing, he certainly could take himself back into his warm area and go back inside. Ed thought snow was fun, but he would leave it to others. He was made for the sun. Nothing wrong with that, thought Ed. See you in the spring.